And we are back on our midweek mailbag, week 14, heading into Vikings week. Against my better judgment, Eric, I am going to start this segment with a couple of draft questions.
Ooh.
The first one of which comes from someone named Russian Bot, but also generic user 216 is their Twitter name, which fantastic, by the way. It says, assuming the Rams pick is top 3 and they take Carter or Anderson, is it crazy to trade up a few picks later to then take a quarterback? Would probably need to
Well,
trade at least next year's first and some later round picks.
I don't know. I mean, they went from 30 to 12 or 31, 32.
32,
Jeez,
yeah.
to
20
12.
spots.
And they gave up, what, a second rounder, like in like a couple day 2 picks. Like, yeah, right. Like, I don't even know if you necessarily, if they're picking in the teens to move up a few spots isn't going to cost you a first rounder the following year. It's not. I mean, look, it's not. No, stop. It's not. Just call Minnesota up wherever.
Well, there's a difference of jumping to 12 than to like 7, right? Like,
but the question was a move up a few spots. If you're picking in the teens and you're only moving up a few spots, then it's not going to cost you first.
Okay.
If you're talking about jumping up into the top 10, okay, yeah, now you're starting to do it.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. If you like a quarterback that much that you're willing to jump back into the top 10, you're probably taking them at 3. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like on or 2 or whatever it is, 4, I think it is now. So I don't think they would jump up for a quarterback. Now, could they still jump up for somebody? Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't rule that out. Like if the Lions are picking 20 and they see a guy they like and they want to jump up and get him, I absolutely think that Brad Holmes has shown that he was willing to be aggressive. If it was a quarterback, though, just because the quarterback is such a different animal of a pick, like you don't, if he's good enough for you to trade up to take in the top 10, then he's good enough for you to take it 3, 4, whatever the pick is going to be. So I wouldn't think that they would trade up for a quarterback, but I wouldn't rule out that they trade up a couple of spots for somebody else.
Yeah. I'm with you, and this is something that I said last year, right? When the discussion was, do the Lions take a quarterback at 32? I'm like, well, if he's good enough for 32, you just take him at 2. Like, I know it's a big difference, but the one thing that throws a kink into this, where I'm just like, okay, I would consider it is Carter, right? Because I want Carter a whole lot.
Yeah, he's a ton of fun.
And that's something that last draft was missing. It was missing in
you didn't have these 2 guys.
100% elite guy, game changer. No offense to Aiden and all these guys, but
we also didn't think Aiden was going to fall, right? We didn't think Aiden was going to drop to 2 at that time either. So go ahead. Sorry though.
So yeah, no, just like the prospect of having just such a game wrecker like Jalen Carter makes me at least consider the scenario where just like, okay, we're not going to have an opportunity to get a guy like this who fits what we want to do, who can really take this defense to now a defense that is playing at least average football and maybe move you into the top 10 discussion as quickly as next year. And then you then you're sitting at 6 and 7 and you're comfortable with a couple quarterbacks. You already have a trade in place around that time so that you know one of your guys is probably going to be there. And even if they're not, you're like, okay, we don't feel terrible about Jared Goff. Maybe we just sit pretty and deal with the 15th pick or whatever it is. It's something that I would consider it, but like you, I'm more of the belief that if you truly believe in this quarterback and you have the draft capital, you just take him at the top.
I'm with you. I'm with you. I still think though that if they like a quarterback, if they think a quarterback's a top 10 quarterback, they're going to take him because the quarterback is the difference, right? Yep. At the same time, if those guys are just so good. Those defenders are the pair of them are just so good. It's like they are difference makers realistically. And I'm the longer we get in, as we start to get into this draft process, I think we're going to see a shift in how people view the quarterbacks in this class. Just talking to Dane last week has given me some pause on a couple of the quarterbacks, most notably Stroud.
Yeah.
I'm starting to think that teams maybe are a little bit more wishy-washy than the analysts are. and that there's a few more flaws to his game. If I'm not mistaken, and I don't think Dane said this to us, but I did read this from Dane somewhere where he essentially said the Lions might look at Stroud and see that while the only thing that he does better than Jared Goff is have a lower price tag. Or I'm paraphrasing,
right?
But that's essentially what he was alluding to, is
Yep.
that are you going to spend your top 5 potential pick on a guy who's all you're doing is saving capital? And so I don't know. And if that's how the league views him, there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to want to go after Stroud because he's a starting quarterback potential in the NFL. But if you're a team like Detroit who has Jared Goff under contract for a couple more seasons, and you don't think that this is an upgrade, then I don't know. I don't know how that's going to change. But it's going to be interesting to see how this draft process plays out, because I am getting this inkling that the quarterbacks are not as tempting as we had originally thought about 3-4 months ago.
Well, going off of that discussion, there's been a lot of questions about Jared Goff this week because he coming off maybe one of his best games as a Detroit Lion. So the question is now, and I know we're going to pose this to Pride Detroit readers later this week.
Yeah, tomorrow.
Like, okay, is he back in the discussion of being the Detroit Lions quarterback of the future?
I think he's in the discussion, certainly. I think he always has been, though. Even when he was having his downs, the down parts of this season, I think he was in that discussion. Is he the long-term answer? That I still don't know. I still am not sold on the fact that he is a guy that is going to elevate your team to the next level. Right. At the same time, he is a top 15 quarterback, and that is something we've said all year, right? I know we get hammered for being critical of Goff, and some of our staff is very, very critical of Goff, and I get that. But the two of us, we have said he is a top 12 to top 15 quarterback. We've said this consistently since he came over. And so if you aren't in a spot where you think that there's a quarterback of the future in this class, and you have a top 15 quarterback in the league, you might not feel the need to move on from him, right? Yeah. Especially if you can get better in other areas. So I don't know exactly what their game plan is going to be. I could see it going either way. And it really comes down to what do they view the upside of this class is. If they look and they say, hey, there's only one quarterback that we think is better than him or has a better long-term outlook than him, and if they think he's going first overall, then they're just going to sit back and they're going to take what's going to be a very reasonable $30 million contract. I know 30 million sounds ridiculous, but that's like middle of the road, top 15 type quarterback money. And they can sit on that. And if they end up, somebody falls in their lap, well, they got an easy out on his contract, right? Like, I don't think he's necessarily the guy for the next decade, right?
Right.
Now, I don't know, maybe he can be, but I do think he could very easily be the guy for the next 2 years. If they don't, it just really depends on how they view the quarterbacks in the next couple of draft cycles.
Yeah, and I think that the thing that everyone gets caught up on is the contract, right? Is because there's nothing more valuable than a franchise quarterback on a rookie deal, and that's correct. Yeah, you're right, 100%. That's a lot easier said than done, though, right? Like, it takes even a guy, that we just saw last week in Jacksonville, like Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, Justin Fields too.
It's taken him 2 years to get where the point where he's at now, and he's still working through it. That takes 2 years to develop a franchise quarterback, and by then you're only going to get 1 or 2 years of like elite level play if they're that guy on that rookie deal. And that's best case scenario, because a lot of worst case scenarios are he's gone by year 3. He's gone by year 4. You failed. You have thrown Jared Goff to the wasteland to take a lottery pick on a quarterback, and now you've set your rebuild back to 3 years. It's an incredible risk, and listen, it's very risky, and that shouldn't scare away a talent evaluator. That shouldn't scare away Brad Holmes. But if you have something in there right now that, yeah, it costs you a lot of money, but you've got a lot of draft capital, you've got a really young team across the board that is not costing you a lot of money anywhere outside of the offensive line, you have enough money. You can build a different way. You don't have to have the young quarterback on the rookie deal. You can save money elsewhere. There's a million other positions. And Jared Goff is helping you put up 30 points a game. He's helping you win. He's helping your offense be a top 10 efficient offense right now. And so I guess like people need to also look at the downside of deciding to move on from Jared Goff is what I'm saying, because it's easy to look at the bright side. It's very easy to look at the bright side. But the grass is not always greener, and draft picks, even high quarterbacks, don't pan out. And I don't think there's a guy right now that everyone is 100% confident is going to pan out. And even if you are, sometimes those don't work either.
I should have, while listening to you, I should have pulled up like some quarterback numbers, like who's been drafted recently. But look, of the top young quarterbacks in the NFL right now, Tua took 3 years to develop. Josh Allen took 3 years before he was Josh Allen. Mahomes took a couple of years before he was Mahomes, right? Justin Fields is in his second year, and he's just starting to come into his. Trevor Lawrence, you said as well as you pointed out, and it just starting to come in. So, like, if you draft a quarterback, you have to know that the next probably 2 years are going to be a learning curve for that quarterback. And if that's not where they're at, if that's not where they think they're at in the rebuild, then that might not be worth it to them. Like, if you're, and I hate to bring this perspective in on like from like Holmes or Campbell, but like if they have a losing season, and let's say this season implodes at the end, let's say they end up like not having to lose. Okay, sorry, I apologize. let me. If they end up having a losing season, let's say they lose 2 more games, they're going to have a losing season, right? If you have back-to-back losing seasons in your first 2, and then you draft a rookie quarterback, and that rookie quarterback doesn't help you, and now you have a couple more losing, how many years, even though you got those 5-6 year contracts, if you're 4 years in and you still haven't got a winning record because now you're taking your couple years for your quarterback to develop, that's a job security issue, right? Like, and so Campbell and Holmes, like Holmes might get one crack at the quarterback spot, probably. Right? And if he doesn't absolutely love a quarterback in this class, why risk it? Add another elite talent and let Dan Campbell work with him and help them, right? Like for Holmes, it might not be worth it unless he loves a guy. Now, if he loves a guy, great, go for it. Put your money where your mouth is and try and turn him and try and develop him as quick as you can. Give him opportunities, try and get him going. But like at the same time, if you only get one crack at it, I can't see them like grabbing a guy that they're not like completely in love with.
The only thing I want to add to the conversation, and it's kind of countering my own point, because yeah, it does take young quarterbacks a long time to develop, but the Lions are in a position also to be putting that young quarterback in just about as perfect of a scenario as they can be, right? They're surrounded by a lot of talent. They're surrounded by a good offensive line. So if there's a team that can maybe fast track a rookie quarterback to really play at a high level right away, like I think Mahomes is probably the best example, right? That offense, and I think we make this comparison all the time, right? Is they have their what's his name, the guy that came before
Alex Smith.
They have their Alex Smith. They can now go get a Patrick Mahomes and make that seamless transition to Patrick Mahomes really just hitting the ground running. I think the Lions are in a scenario where they could potentially do that with a rookie quarterback.
Right.
I just don't know if a Patrick Mahomes is in this draft.
Right. And there's a danger to that, right? Like the Kansas City approach is obviously the most successful outcome from that. At the same time, if you end up never falling in love with this quarterback, you run the risk of turning into the Colts, right? Where you're constantly looking for a veteran. And so that balance in between, is the tricky part. How do you continue to build your team yet get a quarterback that it can succeed with that team? It's a tough balance, which is why,
this offseason is going to be fascinating.
Yeah, because like honestly, like it's a unique approach that Sheila Hamp took with this total organizational rebuild. Was she said, I'm going to give them large contracts and I'm going to be patient with them. That's not the approach most owners have, which is why you see turnover, which is why you see GMs getting fired for, X, Y, and Z. To take this kind of slow approach is really how the NFL used to build, right? And they used to be patient with the GMs and patient with the coaches, but you also have to have the right guys in place. And do they have the right guys in place? It looks like it. I mean, we're still 2 years in, so it's hard to be certain, but it sure looks like they have a lot of the right people in place. And there's always going to be fine tuning, but this kind of longer approach to, rebuilding, it does reflect, I think, a little bit more of like what they've done in Kansas City. And so, yeah, it's really going to come down to like what you said. Do they think that there's a Mahomes type of, quote unquote player that they are a quarterback that they can acquire and then sit behind Goff? And, you've got Goff for 2 more years. So that means you've basically got 2 more drafts, right?
True. You're not going to have better draft capital than you're going to have this year though.
Well, but then it gets tricky. Like everyone talks about trading up. What if you trade back? What if you're trying to acquire different picks? What if you try and take the opposite approach, which I don't necessarily think they're going to do. I think Holmes is going to stay aggressive, but they could do that. They could try and flip it around. They could, if they get to a point where they have a quarterback that they like, they could maybe try and shed a veteran or two. And, they're in 2 years, they could have a couple of veterans that are high profile veterans that could return some trade value. And I don't want to name names, but if you look at, some stat sheets, you could probably figure out who I'm talking about. And they can, there's ways around it. You know what I mean? And then maybe you could give up future picks as well to find ways. So I don't think they're married to a quarterback this year. But I do think they have to make that decision sometime in the next probably 3 years. And maybe right. I mean, like sooner than later. Is that better? I don't know. But
I guess it depends on how far you think you can go with Jared Goff, right? Because if you don't think you can win a Super Bowl with Jared Goff, then it needs to be soon. It needs to be
yes.
It needs to be yesterday. But I don't know. Like we'll see. Like I think we got to close the conversation there. It's one we're gonna be having for the next 5 months.
Yes,
and it's fascinating.
Yes.
I don't think there's a clear-cut answer here. I know a lot of people are eager to get a rookie quarterback in here because it brings in a lot of excitement. It brings in a young guy on a cheap deal. It might bring some mobility, which I think is something that I do think that is one aspect of the offense that this is missing under Jared Goff.
Yeah.
But it's really hard to complain about the offense right now too. So